The immune system and the lymphatic system are tightly knit and closely related. And we will see that in just a little bit. But as we are coming off from the circulatory system, we mentioned that we have a microcirculation, and this microcirculation has a blue side and a red side. There's a blue side, the venous side. The blue side is the venous side, and the red side is the arteriolar side. Okay, so that's the blue side. We don't have a red. We don't have red. Do we have red chalk? No red chalks. Okay, so let's assume that this is the arterial side and that was the venous side. So this is the arterial side and that is the venous side. And we said that the arterial side, this is the arterial side, while this is the venous side. And we said the arterial side, the arrow is pointing out. The arrow is pointing out because all of the oxygen rich blood with a high partial pressure for oxygen and a low partial pressure for carbon dioxide, and this blood is rich in micronutrients, so everything is flowing out to the tissue. So that is my tissue compartment. These are all my cells that make up the tissue, compartment. That make up the tissue compartment. Now, if you look at the other half, the venous side, the arrow is not pointing out. The arrow is actually pointing in, because this is the venous side that reclaims and takes back all of the blood that has a low partial pressure for oxygen and the blood that has a high partial pressure for carbon dioxide, and the blood that is full of metabolic waste. We said that this metabolic waste is very dangerous because if it accumulates at the tissue compartment, it's going to cause metabolic defect, it's going to cause poisoning. So now the arrow is going to point back in. If you remember, I mentioned to you already that if an arrow is pointing from one direction to the other, whether we're looking at the lungs, let's say we have lungs here, and the air, when you're inspiring, when you're breathing in, the air is flowing into the inside of your lung. So your lungs are inflating. They are becoming really big. But if you are, this is during inhalation. But during exhalation, what happens during exhalation? What happens during exhalation is that the lungs are going to shrivel up and shrink, and they're going to get really tight, and air is going to flow out. So this is the pressure inside the lung. That's the pressure outside in the atmosphere. That's the atmospheric pressure. And this is the pressure of the lung, known as the pleural pressure, the pressure of the PIP, intrapleural pressure. One time the air is going in and one time the air is going out. So one time the intrapleural pressure is higher, so air is flowing out in exhalation, and the other time the intrapleural pressure is lower than the atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric is the air outside. So one time air moves in, one time air moves out. So air is a fluid. And we saw that also with the circulatory system for the blood. One time the blood is leaving the heart, going to the microcirculation, and then returning back into the heart. So those are both fluids, whether a liquid fluid like the blood or a gas fluid like the air. So what happens in liquid fluid and what happens in the gas fluid? You see that fluid moved out, just like in this arrow here. If the oxygen, who's the fluid, moved out, if the nutrients who are dissolved and bathed in this fluid solution in the plasma moved out, who pushed it out? What kind of pressure pushed it out? What's the pressure responsible for the movement of the nutrients and the oxygen from the microcirculation into the tissue compartment here? What's the name of this pressure? Yes?
Hydrostatic.
Excellent. So this is the hydrostatic pressure. That's the strongest type of pressure. Hydrostatic pressure. And we said this hydrostatic pressure is generated by who? The heart. Excellent. The heart pump. Very good. So this heart, this pump, is pushing out all of the fluid. Now, if you look at the other half, the arrow is pointing in the other opposite direction. So from the tissue compartment, we have a lot of blood that is full of metabolic waste and nitrogenous waste and acid and reactive oxidative species and metabolic waste. It's pointing into the venous circulation. So what pressure caused that to happen? And please don't say hydrostatic because there's no heart in the tissue. So who's squeezing all of that inside the microcirculation? Hydroosmotic pressure. That's a good one, but it's not hydroosmotic. It's not hydro. Hydro meaning that you're pumping. So that's an osmotic pressure or colloid. That's a colloid osmotic pressure. So because of the pressure gradient, the osmotic pressure that causes the water to go inside the red blood cell and the red blood cell rupture. You know, these athletes who run the marathon and when they get to the finish line, they drink water and then they fall dead. It's because they have been dehydrated for so long, the blood is so hyperosmolar, and when they drink the water, and there's so much water now is diluting the blood, and water is flowing inside the red blood cell, causing the red blood cell to swell, and then turgor and explode. And they have no red blood cells anymore. So here, the colloid pressure is responsible for the movement. Now this brings us to our topic today. We mentioned last week that the hydrostatic pressure is perfect, 100%. 100% pushes all of the oxygen out, all of the nutrients out. But when it comes to reclaiming and bringing back the metabolic waste and bringing back all of the blood that is poor and doesn't have oxygen and the carbon dioxide, we no longer rely on hydrostatic pressure. We rely on osmotic colloid pressure. This osmotic colloid pressure, does it bring back 100%? Does it bring back 100% of the waste? Does it bring back 100%? How much does it bring back? 85%. So you see there's a deficit. 100% coming out, 85% reclaimed back. So if 100 arrows come out, we take 85 back. How much stays behind? 15% of metabolic waste lags behind, build up in the tissue. Now, doesn't that sound like a problem? That sounds like a severe metabolic defect for all of the metabolic waste. 15% of the metabolic waste stays behind and doesn't make it in the circulation. So we need another supportive system, supplementary, auxiliary system that helps us to reclaim and bring back this 15%. Otherwise, it's going to kill our tissue. It's too toxic. Who is the system that's responsible for bringing back the 15%? The lymphatic system. So the lymphatic system is a parallel system to who? To the artery side or to the venous side? Who is the lymphatic system parallel to? Is the lymphatic system parallel to the arterial side or the venous side? The venous side, because the arterial system, 100%, it's perfect, doesn't need any help. The one who needs help is this 85%, the venous side. So now we're going to take our 15% that's left behind through a parallel shuttle system that is going to shuttle and take. So now they're going to work together. The venous side of the microcirculation and the lymphatic side of the microcirculation, they're going to cooperate. They're going to cooperate together, and they're going to 85% is going to be taken back by the venous side, and 15% is going to be taken through the lymphatic system. Is that clear? You will see that the lymphatic system is not only supporting your venous side of the microcirculation, your lymphatic system is also responsible for, ever lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes. Where do they mature? They mature in the lymphatic system. In addition, the lymphatic system is actually helping us in digesting those animal meats. When you eat chicken, when you eat the steak, that lipid, there is a whole system known as lacteals. These are lipid absorbing lymphs. Lipid absorbing lymphs. And what are the other two functions of the lymphatic system that we discussed? It brings back 15% of waste into the venous circulation and into the right heart, into the right atria, then the right ventricle. So this goes all the way back to the heart. And it has another job, number 2. That was number 1. 15% is brought back to the heart, and the lacteals are going to absorb the lipids. What's number 2? The lymphocytes, the immune system. They help the development of lymphocytes for immune defenses. Are we clear? Okay, so let's begin. So what is the microbiome? The microbiome is the microorganisms that reside on and in the human body. Not all of the microorganisms are our enemies. In fact, some microorganisms known as the flora, those are actually essential for our survival. If your digestive system becomes sterile, it doesn't have any microorganisms, bacteria on it, you're gonna die. Because that bacteria is actually helping us to digest and is helping us to defend ourselves against any potential bacteria, because they are living in our digestive tract, so they don't let any other bacteria to live. They say, oh, we live here, go find somewhere else. So they are like our immune system. It's a conflict of interest. They're not trying to help us, but they're trying to secure for their own selves a digestive system, so they fight other bacteria. And you have to know that Now we are using bacteria. Imagine the world without microorganisms. Imagine it was only us. What happens to the people who died? What happens to your body when you die 3 days later? A month later? 3 months later? A year later? A year later we can bring you back and put you in that guy's place. So you see the guy standing there? You see our friend there? You don't see our friend? That's gonna be us. Thanks to who? This is gonna be us thanks to the microorganisms. Imagine there was no microorganisms. The earth is gonna smell because they are the ones who get rid of the dead bodies. So we need them. Okay, we don't have a shredder to shred all the, and even when you shred them, it's gonna smell even worse now. But they're gonna degrade everything. So we need them actually. And now we're using this bacteria to recycle. This industrial, in the factories, the pollutants that come out of the, this toxic material. We use the microbacteria in order to recycle it into good, usable, to renewable resources. We use them to recycle the waste that comes out from this factory that's in the air, the pollution that's in the air. This is called bioremediation. Bioremediation. So we don't live here alone. There are microorganisms. And our immune system ensures that the bacteria in our body, number one, remains at certain places, like your digestive tract only. Your blood is sterile. Your blood is clean, 100%. No bacteria on it. Your tissues are sterile, 100%. No bacteria or microorganisms on them. Only the digestive tract. And the bacteria are shut down. They cannot move from one place into the other. And they cannot make you sick. But what happens to people who are immunocompromised? People who have HIV. People who have HIV, their immune system is weakly attenuated and is damaged, so they can never fight off an infection. So now all the bacteria that had the potential to harm you is now going to wake up. Imagine now the cops. The cops go on a strike. They say, we're not going to go to work tomorrow. Now everybody finds out that tomorrow, no cops. You call 911, nobody's going to come to help you. What do you think is going to happen that day? So that's exactly what happens in AIDS. So when we have AIDS, the immune system is not working. So all of the bacteria that is supposed to stay only in the digestive tract is going to go somewhere else now. All the bacteria that goes inside our nose, inside our ears, inside our mouth, and they get access into the internal environment, and they usually get killed immediately once they make it inside our bodies with the immune system. Now they're not going to get killed, and they're going to harm us. So HIV doesn't kill you itself, doesn't damage your tissues. It damages the white blood cells that fight for you and defend you against any microbial infection. So now you will die to some diseases that most of the people really do not die of. So the immune system is not an organ system. It is a cell population. So for example, the nervous system is the brain, the spinal cord, and the associated afferent and efferent system of neurons. We also have the skeletal system. This is made up of bones, ligaments, and cartilages. And we have the digestive system that is made up of the esophagus and the stomach, the mouth, the oral cavity, and the nasal cavity, and the intestines, and the rectal canal, and so on and so forth. The immune system is not made up of organs. It's a collection of cells that work together. And these cells are known as the white blood cells. We talked about that when we did the blood, when we fractionated the blood and we spin the blood in a centrifuge. One level was red, one was white, and one was plasma. So the immune cells are concentrated in like police precinct. You know, the polices report to precincts. The precincts of your immune cells are known as lymphoid tissue, or the lymphoid. That's the precinct that you have all of the white blood cells aggregate to. Okay, so there are networks of organs and vein-like vessels that recover the fluid. They inspect it for disease agents, and they activate the immune responses, and they return the fluid back to the bloodstream. We discussed that. Remember, we said that the lymphatic tissue is a network of organs and vein-like vessels that recover fluid. How much do they recover? Percentage, 15%. And who recovers the 85%? The circulatory system, your blood vessels. The lymphatic vessels are not blood vessels. Lymphatic vessels are made up of endothelial cells. Lymphatic vessels are made up of endothelial cells. They inspect and they screen, they do immunosurveillance. So this immunosurveillance is when we're going around patrolling, when the white blood cells are going around and patrolling to ensure that there is no microorganisms. So what is immunosurveillance? That's the process of scanning and running the tissue to ensure that there are no microbes and there are no microorganisms that are harmful. They activate the immune responses. Once we detect that there is an invading microbe, bacteria, a parasite, or fungi, or a virus, we immediately trigger an immune response. And we recover the 15% of fluid that lags behind into the lymphatic vessels. Now, if you look at the lymphoid or the lymphatic system, you see that the lymphatic vessels penetrate nearly every tissue. Lymphatic vessels penetrate nearly every tissue. And they are a collection of lymphoid tissues and organs that produce immune cells. We discussed the fluid recovery, that we recover 15% from the blood and the blood capillaries. Is everybody following me? Do you see where my mouse is? The blood capillaries reabsorb 85%. The blood capillary, the blood vessels. But the rest 15% enter the lymphatic vessels. Now imagine the lymphatic vessels are blocked. What's going to happen to the 15%? If there's an obstruction of the lymphatic vessels, what happens to the tissue? It's going to be engorged with the 15%, because the only way we flush that 15% is through the lymphatic vessel. Lymphatic vessel is clogged, so all of the lymph fluid is going to back up, and that's going to cause lymphedema. We talked about edema in the past. That is the pathological accumulation of fluid in a tissue compartment due to some defects in the osmotic balance. We talked about lower limb edema, and that is when water starts to flow into the tissue compartment, because the tissue compartment is hyperosmolar compared to the blood compartment. We talked about Kwashiorkor's disease. Kwashiorkor's disease. What happens in Kwashiorkor's disease? Quash. What happens in Kwashiorkor's disease? In Kwashiorkor's disease, because the children are so impoverished and they are in a famine and they are so hungry, there is not enough protein in the blood. So what happens to the osmolarity of the blood when there's no proteins? Does the osmolarity go up because there's no protein, or does the osmolarity go down? The osmolarity goes down because there is not enough proteins. But compared to the tissue wasn't affected. So the tissue has a high protein content, and water will flow from an area of low osmolarity to an area of high osmolarity. That's why you see these babies with big bellies. So that's an example of an edema. Sometimes you have, when we discuss congestive heart disease, the blood is obstructed. It cannot return back into the right heart in order to be pumped into the pulmonary circulation. So all of the water now is going to flow out. It's going to flow out into the lung, and you're going to have a lot of water in the lungs. So lymphedema is a swelling due to the interference in the lymphatic drainage. And the lymphoid system, we said there's immunosurveillance, where the excess filtered fluid is gonna pick up foreign cells and chemicals from the tissues, and it's gonna pass through it's like a strainer, but a special type of strainer. This 15% that we have taken and all of the excess filter fluid has to be filtered through the lymphatic nodes. And the lymphatic nodes will screen. This 15%, does it have any microbes in it? Because the tissue is susceptible to infection all the time. And all of the fluid that is returning where? Is returning back to the heart. So when it returns back to the heart and is full of microbes, now the heart is going to be actually participating in the dissemination of microbial organisms that are going to cause an infection. So we need to filter this 15% that is being taken from the tissue compartment. We talked about the lacteals. What do lacteals do? We mentioned lacteals. Right here, lacteals. What do the lacteals do? Lacteals are responsible for, we said, animal meat. When you eat the animal meat, the chicken and the meat and the beef, what happens? It gets digested thanks to the help of the lacteals. What are lacteals? Lacteals are appendages. These are structures that are found in the small intestine, and they help absorb the lipid. So your lymphatic system is helping in recovery, is helping in immunosurveillance, is helping in lipid absorption. The components of the lymphoid system are, number one, the lymph. So the lymph is actually the recovered fluid, which is it has a milky appearance. In the lab, if you look at the lymphatic system, you will see that it is whitish in color, milky. And lymphatic vessels are responsible for transporting the lymph. And the lymphoid tissue represents aggregates of lymphocytes and macrophages, which populate in many organs of the body. That's the lymphoid tissue. And lymphoid tissues, these aggregates of the lymphocytes and macrophages, so we need a system of vessels that are conduits, tubes that recover the lymph fluid and bring it back into the lymphoid tissue. And each lymphoid tissue is going to be like a precinct, but we need multiple lymphoid tissues to make a lymphoid organ, like the spleen. Now that's a huge compartment of multiple, diverse variety of lymphoid tissue, the spleen. So the spleen is an example of a lymphoid organ that is Lymphoid cells are concentrated and they are surrounded by connective tissue capsules. So, if you look here, this is your lymphoid system. Please inspect and examine your lymphoid system. You see that there are palatine tonsils, cervical lymph nodes, and this is the right lymphatic duct, and this is the thymus. I mean, when we did the endocrine system, we talked about the thymus. The thymus, we said that it's always found where, if you wear a necklace, where the necklace ends, it's right in that space, in the around the mediastinum. What is the significance of the thymus? You know, we said babies have huge thymus. When they grow up, it shrink. And babies have huge pineal gland, and when they get older, it shrinks also. So this is known as involution. We discussed that. We said involution is when the glands shrink. Now listen up. This thymus, why is it important? We discussed that in the endocrine system. What's the significance and the importance of the thymus? Smells what?
Sleeping.
The thymus for sleeping. That's the pineal gland secreting melatonin for sleeping. The thymus is what? The thymus is the site of the maturation of the T cells. T cells. Why do they call them T cells? There are B cells that mature in the bone marrow. That's why we call them B cells. And there are T cells that mature in the thymus. That's why we call them T cells. We call them T cells. Okay. This is the meningeal lymphatic vessels. These are the palatine tonsils. And you see that this is the red bone marrow, and these are the popliteal lymph nodes. These are the popliteal lymph nodes. You see, lymph nodes are scattered all over the body. If you examine, this is a very interesting figure. Those are the lymph nodes, and you see that you have this cisterna chyli, and this is the thoracic duct, and that's the abdominal, intestinal, and mesenteric lymph nodes. And you see that you have scattered lymph nodes and you have lymphatic ducts. These are the big tunnels that allow for the lymph fluid to accumulate right before it enters into the lymphatic organ. So you have lymphatic vessels. You see these are the meningeal, that's in your brain. The meningeal lymphatic vessels, because we need to drain every possible tissue, including your brain. So the meningeal lymphatic vessels are responsible for draining all of the lymphatic fluid from the meninges. What are the meninges? What are the meninges? That was in AMP1. What are the meninges? Excellent. So there are three protective layers or membranes around the brain. There's a superficial one, a middle one, and a very deep one that is intimate, touching the brain. What's the name of the layer that is touching the brain? You know, they call them mom. The tough mom, mother. The middle, the spider mom, mother. And then the mother that is soft and touching the baby, touching the brain, that is also known as a mother. What are the three mothers? Excellent. So those three are the three protective capsules. And they are susceptible, always, and vulnerable to inflammation, known as what? The meninges. Meninges suffer from dangerous disease. where this disease is gonna cause an inflammation of the meninges. What do we call that? Meningitis. So inflammation of the meninges is the meningitis. These are the palatine tonsils, and these are the cervical lymph nodes. So you see that the meningeal lymphatic vessel drain into the cervical lymph nodes. The right lymphatic duct, is responsible for returning the fluid, and you have the subclavian vein. So remember, we said that the lymphatic vessels are parallel and friendly and working together so closely with who? With the arteries or the veins? Who are the lymphatic vessels working closely with? The arteries or the veins? I'm sorry? The artery doesn't need help. The artery is working with the heart. The heart is pumping, and the hydrostatic pressure is helping the artery to move into the microcirculation. But it is the veins who only take 85. They cannot take 100. So the lymphatic vessels are helping the veins to bring back the 15%. So in the end, the 15% is not going to go in the heaven. It's going to go back into the heart. So where does it go into the heart? In the subclavian vein, the subclavian vein. You see here we have the thoracic duct, and we have the cisterna chyli. We have auxiliary lymph nodes. These are under the armpit. And you have the left internal jugular vein and the thoracic duct. And this is the inguinal lymph node. These are the inguinal lymph nodes. And this is the popliteal lymph node. And these are the lymphatic vessels. So lymph and lymphatic vessels. The lymph is a clear, colorless solution similar to plasma, but is low in protein. That's the milky type. If you take a sample from blood, plasma, and you take a sample of this 15% lymph fluid that we have recovered from the tissue compartment, and you inspect them visually, you look at them visually, you're going to see that they are clear, colorless. But when you look at the content of the lymph fluid and you compare it to plasma, what will you find? You will find that the lymph fluid is deficient and has less water or proteins. It has less protein. So compared to the plasma, is the lymph hyperosmolar or hypoosmolar? It is hypoosmolar. Okay, so the lymph flows through a system of lymphatic vessels. The lymph flows through a system of lymphatic vessels. There are lymphatic capillaries. The lymphatic capillaries are terminal lymphatics, and these are microscopic vessels that penetrate nearly every tissue of the body. So they are absent from cartilage, from the cornea, the bone, and the bone marrow. The capillary wall these are endothelial cells that are overlapping each other like roof shingles, and they are closed at one end, and cells are tethered to the surrounding tissue by anchoring filaments. Gaps or intercellular clefts between the cells are large enough to allow the bacteria and the cells to enter the lymphatic capillary. endothelium creates valve-like flaps that open when the interstitial fluid pressure is high and close when it is low. You see, this is the tissue fluid, and these are the lymphatic vessels, and that shows you here. You see the lymphatic vessels. Everybody, look where my mouse is. The lymphatic vessels have these little inlets. You see the inlet? The inlet, what's around this green structure? What is that green tube? That's your lymphatic vessel. The lymphatic vessel, what is around it? These purple dots. What are these purple dots? So the nucleus. So what is that? What are these structures around the lymphatic vessels called? Structures around the lymphatic vessels are called what? What are those? This is the nucleus. But all of that's the tissue. That's the tissue. You see, the nucleus is in a cell. Those are cells. Cell. Those are all cells. So all of these cells make up a tissue. Now, how does the tissue dump all of the waste inside the lymphatic vessel? You see the inlet? You see the inlets? Those are the inlets that, you see the arrows pointing from the tissue into the inside of the tube. That's how we're going to collect and absorb all of the waste that must be removed, the 15%. Those are anchoring filaments. What are anchoring filaments? What are anchoring filaments? Anchoring filaments are like that staple together your cells. To staple together the cells. You know, your cells are not sitting like how you are sitting now in class. The cells in your body, they're sitting like the subway. You know how you are in a subway? People are touching each other. That's how the cells are actually even worse than the subway. Not only are they touching, they are stapled together. They're hooked together. There are filaments and proteins, CAPs, C-A-P, cell adhesion proteins, CAMs, C-A-M, cell adhesion molecules. They hook up and they staple the cells and make sure they're so closely tied together. So those are the anchoring filaments. There's an endothelium of lymphatic capillary, and these are intercellular clefts. Lymphatic vessels. These are larger lymphatic vessels that are composed of 3 layers. Isn't that interesting? Who else had a tunica interna, tunica media, and tunica maxima? Who was that? Tunica interna, tunica media, tunica maxima, or tunica externa. Where do we hear that? Where? In the heart? Does the heart have a tunica intima? No, it does not. Who has a tunica interna, tunica media, tunica maxima, or externa? The blood vessel. So the blood vessel, the tube, the conduit that takes the blood into the blood vessel has 3 layers. The tunica intima, which is intimate, touching the blood, and the tunica media, which is in the middle, and the tunica maxima, which is on the outside. Who else has that? The lymph. The lymph vessel also, just like the blood vessel, they're all vessels. Blood vessel, lymph vessel, they're all vessels. But the blood vessel is made up of endothelial cells, while the tissue lymphatic vessels are made up of tunica externa, tunica media, and tunica interna. These are lymphatic vessels that have endothelium and valves. And isn't that interesting? In our blood vessels we had valves. What did we say the disease where the valves are damaged? What do we call that? What's the name of the disease where the lymphatic vessels are damaged? Varicose veins. So when the lymphatic vessels are damaged, the blood vessels are damaged, blood is unable to return back to the circulation. So it's going to accumulate and aggregate and pool. It's going to pool in the bottom of the legs. What is varicose vein? You're Aaron or Ekta? Aaron. What is varicose vein? Yeah, so the blood is pooling in the legs. That is as a result of varicose vein. That's how you detect varicose vein. A patient come in the hospital, you look in the leg, blood is pooling down. That is because of varicose vein. But my question was not what is the clinical manifestation. What is it? What causes varicose veins? I just said that 3 times. What causes the blood? Yes. Yeah, so the blood vessel has a valve. The valve is supposed to allow the blood to go in one direction. This valve is broken now because pregnancy, because of obesity, because of occupational hazard, a police traffic officer standing up on the legs all the time, a nurse. So now the valves are broken. So now blood pools. Now you see how the blood pools. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they are not that bad actually. They are not that bad because they just cause this pain because the blood is now clotted. But it's not like a life-threatening condition. But once the blood vessels are damaged, we make angiogenesis. Genesis is the making, angiogenesis, hematogenesis, osteogenesis. So the making, your blood vessels or regenerative tissue. We can make blood vessels over and over again. So we can make new blood vessels where the blood vessels are damaged. But it's gonna take surgery in order to remove the old blood vessels so that new blood vessels can be stimulated to grow in their place.
So the surgery is a permanent cure for it?
Absolutely, because you removed the bad, damaged, defected veins, and then new ones are going to arise. It's going to stimulate their entry into the mitosis, into the entry of the cell cycle. Okay, what's the treatment, Ariana, for varicose veins? Yeah, that's the main reason. Okay, now you see these are our lymphatic vessels. Just like our blood vessels. They have endothelium. They have a tunica interna. They have a tunica media. They have a tunica externa. Lymphatic trunks converge to form 2 collecting ducts. Why do we need to collect lymph fluid? In order to bring it back into the heart. There we go. This figure is really important. Who's green? If you see where my mouse is, what is this green network here? What does the green network represent? Yeah, that's the lymphatic vessels. Who are they friends with? Are they friends with the blue side or the red side? They are with the friends and parallel to the blue side. And whose blue side? Artery or vein? So that shows you they're helping the vein, not the artery. And the vein is going to take 85%, and the lymphatic vessel will say, don't worry about the other 15. I'm the safety. I will bring that back. And they are moving together. When they move together, where do they end up meeting again? They have to all meet again in the heart. Where is the vein taking the 85% to? To the heart. Where is the lymph taking the lymph back to? The heart. So they both meet, the vein and the lymphatic vessels that are parallel to it here. Everybody look where my mouse is. You see where we have the blue circulation and the green circulation parallel to it. They're going to go parallel up, 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 up until they get closer to the heart, and then they're going to empty into the heart. Where do they meet? They meet at a certain point. What's the name of the point where they meet? The subclavian vein. They meet in the subclavian vein. Your lymphatic vessels and your blood vessels that are veins, the veins that are carrying 85% of waste and lymphatic fluid in the vessels, that is 15%, they both meet up. 85 plus 1500, they meet up at one point. What's the name of the point? The subclavian vein. Very good. So this figure is just showing you that this lymphatic system is everywhere in your body. As long as where there's a vein, there's a lymphatic vessel. Where there's a vein, there's a lymphatic vessel helping it, parallel to it. They are all friends. They only end the friendship where? At the subclavian vein. There you go. So now, if you look at your entire body, it all gets, you know, the lymphatic system is like a sewage system, is a drainage system. It drains. Now, the way that your whole body is drained is very interesting. It's drained by two systems. The right half of your brain, if you look there, if you look where my mouse is, the right half of your brain and the right half of your chest and your right arm, that's one system. And the rest of the body is another system. Isn't that interesting? Only two systems of lymphatics in our body. You have the thoracic region and you have the thoracic region and a thoracic duct. So you have here, you see this is drained by the right lymphatic duct, and this is by the thoracic duct. And you see that, the purple line is the lymphatic duct, the right lymphatic duct, and the rest of the body is drained by the thoracic duct. So all of the lymph that is bringing back, all of the lymphatic vessels bringing waste from your upper right side is draining where? Is draining where? In the right lymphatic duct. And the rest of the body is draining where? In the thoracic duct. So two ducts. How many ducts do we have? Two ducts. Which one is draining the right side, the right upper quadrant side of our body? The right side of the brain, the right shoulder, the right arm, the right lymphatic duct. And the rest of our body is drained where? Thoracic duct. Okay, if we look at the flow of the lymph, so the lymph flows under forces that are similar to those that govern the venous return, except no pump, the heart. The lymph flows at low pressure and slower speed than the venous blood. So the stretching of the vessels stimulates their contraction, and they are moved along by rhythmic contractions of lymphatic vessels, the squeezing of skeletal muscles, rhythmic pulsations of nearby arteries, thoracic respiratory pump, and rapidly flowing blood in the subclavian veins is going to draw the lymph in it. This is the lymphatic system. And that is the lymphatic system of your brain, of your skull. And you see that this is the dura mater, the tough mater, the arachnoid mater, and you have your pia mater. What's happening to the red vessel? The arrow is pointing down. Pointing down meaning that it's bringing oxygenated blood to the tissue, and going back up and bringing the deoxygenated blood back into the lymphatic vessels. Now let's look at these lymphoid cells. You know, you need to remember something that's very important. Where do all the white blood cells, where are they made? Where are they made? The bone marrow. They all are made from the bone marrow. You know, all the people go to elementary school in the neighborhood. But does everybody graduate college in the neighborhood? No, some people are from New York City, they graduate college in New York City. Some people in New York City, they graduate college in California. That's what happens with the lymphocytes. Everybody is born in the bone marrow. But bone marrow tissue is bone marrow cells are going to be graduating in the bone marrow. They're going to get their training how to fight the microbes in the bone marrow. That's why we call them B lymphocytes. That's why we call them B lymphocytes. While T lymphocytes are also born and they are made in a bone marrow, but they graduate where? They get their training where? In the thymus. You know, the military, you're born in your home, but you have to go to the military academy and get their training there. They don't come to you. You have to go there. Okay. So we have cells that are associated with the lymphoid system. We have neutrophils. Neutrophils are antibacterial. Neutrophils are antibacterial. You need to know this slide, I think, is the most important slide in the whole lecture. This slide here. You need to know this 100%. Even if you move on to other classes, you're going to see this again. Even when you're doing fundamentals of nursing, you're going to be doing that. Who do neutrophils fight? They fight bacteria. If there is a parasite, or if there is a fungi, or if there is a worm, or if there is a virus, will there be neutrophils? No, very good, because neutrophils are only fighting bacteria. Natural killer cells, NK cells. These are lymphocytes that attack and destroy infected host cells and cancerous cells. You know, we need to do housekeeping. So some cells in your body are damaged, some cells in your body are defected, some cells in your body have been burned by the sun, some cells in your body have defected, misfolded, improperly folded, deposition and accumulation of proteins. We need to get rid of that. So the natural killer cells, that's why they call them natural killer cells, because they kill the cells of the body who are messed up. And they also kill cancer cells. Now they're doing research to find out, why are the natural killer cells unable to kill the cancer cells? If we can if we can awaken the natural killer cells and make them go and kill the cancer cells, we will cure cancer. We have done a significant progress in HIV research than cancer. HIV used to be the number 4 killer of the world. Back in the 90s, oh good God, it was eliminating the people. It was like a pandemic. And especially in the communities that are disadvantaged, the communities that are socioeconomically broken, because there is not a lot of prevention. There is an inequality in the medical and providing the hospitals and medical supplies. and the people are not aware. So HIV killed many people, and most of them, they were the poor people, the uneducated people, the people who are economically disadvantaged. But the affluent people and the educated people, did they suffer that much from HIV? They did not. So it's interesting how the richer you are and the more educated you are, the healthier you are. Yeah, that's actually very true. And you realize also that HIV was the number 4 killer back in the 90s. Now is the number 20. So 20 is still a lot, but it's a lot better than number 4. Okay? T lymphocytes, they mature in the thymus. They are born in the bone marrow, but they say to the bone marrow, bye-bye bone marrow. Thank you for having me here. I'm gonna go graduate in the thymus. But the B cells, they're gonna say, you can go. We're staying here. We're staying local. Macrophages are large phagocytic cells, and they are these are macrophages, and they are large phagocytic cells, and they are antigen presenting cells. They display antigens on the surface to alert other immune cells. Dendritic cells are antigen presenting cells that are found in the skin, the mucous membranes, and the lymphoid organs. So dendritic cells are antigen presenting cells that are found in the skin. There are mucous membranes and lymphoid organs. So macrophages, phagocytizing bacteria. That shows you an image of the macrophages engulfing. What's a macrophage? You know, when you hear of a phagocyte, what's a phagocyte? You know, break down the name into 2 different meanings. Phagocyte, phagocyte. Phagocyte. Phagocytes. Phago means cell eating. Cyte is a cell. Phago is eating. These are cell eaters. Macrophage, from the name, macro. What does macrophage mean? Yeah, these are large eaters. So these macrophages are huge These macrophages are huge eaters, and let's say that they ran into some bacteria. Let's say that this is bacteria. What will they do to it? They're going to swallow it and they are going to engulf. And once it's inside, the lysosomes are going to damage the bacteria, and they are going to destroy the bacteria because you have lysosomal enzymes and you have acid. Lysosomal enzymes, you have acid, you have degradative enzymes, acid degradative enzymes, lysosomal enzymes, metalloproteinases, lysosomal enzymes, metalloproteinases, acid degradative enzymes, and they're all going to be used in order to the acid, the reactive oxidative species, ROS, reactive oxidative species, they're all going to do what to the bacteria? The acid, lysosomal enzymes, metalloproteinases, acid degradative enzymes, reactive oxidative species. What are they going to do to the bacteria? They're going to destroy and kill the bacteria. These are the macrophages. If we look at the lymphoid tissue represents aggregations of lymphocytes in the connective tissue of the mucous membranes of various organs. Aggregations of lymphocytes in the connective tissue of mucous membranes and various organs. There are diffuse lymphoid tissue. These are lymphocytes that are scattered, not densely clustered. So they are prevalent in the body passages and they are open to the exterior respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive tract. In the mucous membranes, there is a diffuse lymphoid tissue known as MALT. MALT. This is very important. What is MALT? MALT is mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. Mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. This mucosa associated lymphoid tissue is a tissue that is in the mucosa. A tissue that is in the mucosa. This tissue that's in the mucosa, meaning that it's in the digestive tract mucosa, in the respiratory system mucosa, and is responsible for tracking and trapping, like a mouse trap with glue. So they are in the mucous membranes. They are like with mucus trapping any passage of microbes. So diffuse lymphoid tissue where lymphocytes are scattered, not densely clustered. They are prevalent in body passages that are open to the exterior and respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive tracts. In the mucous membranes, diffuse lymphoid tissue is called mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. MALT, mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. Lymphoid nodules, follicles. These are lymphocytes and macrophages that gather in dense masses. Lymphocytes and macrophages gather in dense masses. They may be temporary or permanent features of some tissues. These aggregated lymphoid nodules, known as the pear patches, they represent large clusters of nodules in the small intestine. Lymphoid nodules in the mucous membrane of the small intestine. So lymphatic organs are anatomically well defined. Now we have moved up from lymphatic vessels into lymphatic tissue into lymphatic organs. So those lymphatic organs have connective tissue capsules that separate lymphatic tissue from neighboring tissues. They separate lymphatic tissue from neighboring tissue. So these are primary lymphoid organs that include your red bone marrow, your thymus, your spleen. Those are actual organs. And remember, we discussed already that the T and B cells become immunocompetent. What's the difference between immunocompromised and immunocompetent? Immunocompromised and immunocompetent. Who's willing to take an educated guess? A guess that reflects education. Educated guess. If you don't have an educated guess, it's okay to be silent. What's immunocompetent and immunocompromised? Educated guess. What's immunocompromised? We discussed that. From the name, immunocompromised. Yeah, so somebody with HIV, that's an immunocompromised person. So the immune system is compromised, it's not working. Now, what is immunocompetent now? Yeah, so immunocompetent, that's why we say the T cells become immunocompetent. They graduate in the thymus. While the bone marrow, the B cells become immunocompetent where? They become immunocompetent where? In the immune system. The bone marrow, the B cells become immunocompetent in the bone marrow. That's why they call them B cells. So they are born in the bone marrow, they graduate in the bone marrow. T cells born in the bone marrow graduate in the thymus. Now it's time to talk about the red bone marrow. So if you look at your axial skeleton, this axial skeleton here, the axial skeleton and part of your femur, this upper part of your femur, that's all your red bone marrow. So the red bone marrow is your humerus, is the upper side of the femur, your skull, and that shows you where blood is made. So if you take your bone and you slice it in half, it's like if you have a boiled egg. If you cut the boiled egg in half and you look inside, you're gonna find yellow yolk. Is it yellow or gray? Yellow? Doesn't it turn gray? Why do I think it's gray?
I feel like the outside of it is gray.
Yeah, the outside is gray.
But that's
Yeah.
if you overcook it. That's if you overcook it.
If you overcook it. It's a boiled egg. How do you overcook it?
It's only supposed to be in like 15 minutes.
Oh, I see. That's
After
interesting.
15 minutes, you kill all the protein.
Oh, okay, that's very nice. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's why all my eggs come out gray. I never ate good eggs. Anyway, I always overeat things. Okay, so when we slice the bone, we find red tissue and yellow too. Now, wasn't that confusing? We thought it's all white all the way through, outside and inside. No, not inside. Inside there is yellow marrow, meaning butter and lipids and oil and cholesterol. Red bone marrow is where we make the red blood cells and the white blood cells. So that's all red bone marrow. It is soft, loosely organized, highly vascular material that is separated from osseous tissue by the endosteum of the bone. It's involved in the hematopoiesis, the blood formation, and the immunity, and blood-forming cells are attached to the reticular cells and other elements of the marrow stroma. As blood cells mature, they push their way through the reticular and endothelial cells to enter the sinus and flow away in the blood. There you go. This is the red bone marrow. And this is the adipose cells. So this is the thymus. It's a member of the endocrine, lymphoid, and immune systems. They are bilobed organs located in the superior mediastinum between the sternum and the aortic arch. They house developing T cells and secrete hormones regulating their activity. With age, they exhibit large degree of involution, and they degenerate and they shrink. So, immunosenescence. What is immunosenescence? That's another very important concept. From the name, senescence. Senescence is like senile. Anybody heard of senile osteoporosis? You know, women suffer from menopausal osteoporosis. Men suffer from senile osteoporosis. Well, both of them are osteoporosis, meaning the bone is going to develop pores. But women have menopause-related osteoporosis because in menopause, women can no longer secrete the essential hormone known as estrogen. And if there is no more estrogen, the bone tissue is going to become really weak. Men, as they get older, they become senile. When they become 70-year-old like me, they become so old. What happens to their immune cells? They retire. Senile, senescence, when you're too old. So now when they retire, can they work anymore? They cannot work. That's the thymus. So if we look at the lymph nodes are like a bean shaped. Anybody eats beans? 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 Delicious beans. You know, beans are delicious. I'm going to make beans today, put it on my YouTube channel, watch it. Actually, today I'm very busy, but when I'm free, I'm going to make my favorite beans with boiled eggs. Oh, good God. And sesame oil.
I've never heard of that together.
Okay, that's my country's number one dish. Yummy.
What kind of beans?
The fava beans. Actually, that's also good for your red blood cells because fava is B12 and it's gonna give you the ability to make a lot of red blood cells. So the lymph nodes are bean shaped. Beans are yummy. Bean shaped structures that cleanse lymph and are the sites of lymphocyte activation. They are the most numerous lymph organs, and the parenchyma is divided into cortex and medulla. You will find this anatomical reference everywhere. Cortex, medulla, adrenal cortex, adrenal medulla. Nephron, cortical nephron, medullary nephron. You will hear this a lot. What does it mean? Cortex, medulla, cortical, medullary. What does that mean? Cortex means the roof, the surface. Medulla means deeper. So the medulla, you see, we say that the cerebral cortex, is it on the outside or deep inside? Yeah, the cerebral cortex is on the outside. And the medulla, is it on the outside or in deep? It's deep inside the brain. Yeah. Now we have several afferent vessels. Now we need to talk about the difference between afferent and efferent. What's the difference between afferent and efferent? We talked about that when we were looking at the center. And if you're coming into the center, that is afferent. If you're leaving the center, you are efferent. Input, sensory, afferent. Output, motor, efferent. You remember that? There we go. What's that bean-shaped structure? You see, it looks like a bean. Bean-shaped structure, isn't it? That bean-shaped structure, you see a lot of arrows that are pointing into the bean. They're pointing into the bean. These are afferent lymph vessels. Then after we get filtered, we leave the bean through afferent or efferent. We entered through afferent. We leave through efferent. What happened in the middle between afferent and efferent? What happened? Filtration, straining. You know the strainer? People put spaghetti in a strainer. You don't need to. You can just grab it like that and just eat it. Oh, for all that stuff, yeah. Okay, now, we talked about that. What's the type of lymph tissue that is found in your intestine that help in the absorbance of lipids? What do we call that? Laiba. What do we call the type of lymphatic tissue that is distributed in the intestine that helps in the absorbance of lipid tissue? Lacteals. Very good, very good, very good, very good, very good, very good. Okay. Now, there are other areas of lymph node concentration. The inguinal lymph nodes. See, that's the inguinal region. Now, these lymphoid organs, these bean-shaped structures, do they ever get infection? They get sick all the time. Lymphadenitis. So whenever you hear itis, what does that mean? What's happening when you hear itis? When you hear itis, what does that mean? Itis means inflammation. Inflammation. Lymphadenitis means that there is inflammation associated with a swollen or a painful lymph node. Swollen or a painful lymph node. Responding to foreign antigens. Lymphadenopathy. What does that mean? That's when you have a lymph node disease. You guys need to have a very good understanding of inflammation. What is inflammation? Inflammation. What is...
Flare up?
Yeah, so an inflammation, many students don't understand what is inflammation. You have to know that this is an internal environment. Internal environment. That is your body. So your body in the internal environment, is always suffering from these are internal environment. This is the internal environment. And that is the external environment. The internal environment and the external environment are not friends. The external environment is always insulting, stressing your internal environment. What's an example? The hypothermia when it's too cold outside. The hyperthermia when it's too hot outside. Too cold, too hot. What about also you have hypothermia, hyperthermia, and chemical agents like corrosive agents like detergent. Another example is going to be an infection like a microbial infection, like bacteria, parasite, virus. So they're always insulting your internal environment. Your immune system is fighting against the bacteria, the parasite, the lymphocyte, the worms. But sometimes your immune system is overwhelmed due to the severity of the infection. We call that an infection. When a microbial agent, a pathogenic, patho means disease causing, pathogenic microbe infect your body, that's an infection. Students have a problem differentiating between an infection and an inflammation. Infection is when a microbe is pathogenic, because not all microbes are pathogenic. We said we have some microbes who are flora. What's a flora? Flora is a microbe that is helping you to digest. It's helping you to recycle some material that is toxic, converting it into useful substance. So when the pathogen is severe, or the duration of the infection is lingering on and on, you're sick for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, then your immune system is now overburdened, overwhelmed. So now you move into the next stage, and that is the cells begin to die. Cell death. Usually cells would die with a normal way, known as apoptosis. So when a cell dies by apoptosis, this is something that is very favorable. We love that. We want that apoptosis. We want apoptosis so that the cells will die in a normal, healthy way. The plasma membrane of the cell doesn't rupture, the inside lysosomal enzymes don't spill around and destroy and degrade and damage nearby tissue. That's apoptosis. But cells, when you're sick, they don't die by apoptosis. They die, apoptosis is plus. We like apoptosis. Plus is good. Heart, we like apoptosis. Apoptosis is thumbs up. We like apoptosis. But there is a negative, very bad, thumbs down, very bad way of dying. What is that called? Necrosis. Necrosis, when a cell dies by necrosis, that's very dangerous. When a cell dies by necrosis, that is very dangerous. And then we move on from necrosis into We move on from necrosis into the inflammation. And we have two kinds of inflammation. There is acute inflammation and there is chronic inflammation. There's acute inflammation and there is chronic inflammation. Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you just explain how it goes from necro to inflammation?
Okay. So in necrosis, there are features of harmful cell death. Meaning, in apoptosis, the cells die by blebs. So the integrity of the cell membrane is intact. No spillage. You know, this cell is full of some crazy enzymes inside the cytoplasm. If the plasma membranes breaks out and is ruptured, then all of these enzymes are going to spill out. And they spill out and they're going to damage and destroy nearby tissue. That's in necrosis. But in apoptosis, the cell is going to be converted into little bubbles known as blebs. Blebs, B-L-E-B-S. Those blebs are when the cell shrinks down into little bubbles. Necrosis is when the cell spills and it's like a nuclear power plant. Imagine you have a nuclear power plant in the middle of a neighborhood and then there's like a damage or explosion and everything is spilling nearby to the neighborhood people. So it's going to kill everybody. That's necrosis. So in necrosis now, you have a spillage of lysosomal enzymes, degradative enzymes, metalloproteinases, lysosomal enzymes, acid, reactive oxidative species, intercellular content that is used to fight the microbes is now spilling and is destroying not the microbes but the nearby neighboring tissue due to this necrosis. So now when the tissue is being damaged, the tissue becomes red, the tissue becomes swelling, swollen, red, swollen, the tissue becomes hot, heat, the tissue becomes painful, and the tissue loses its function. And that's inflammation. When you have those 5 signs, redness, heat, pain, swelling, loss of function, you have now entered inflammation. How long does the inflammation lingers on? If it lingers on for a short amount of time, that is known as acute inflammation. But if the inflammation continues for many long time, that is now chronic inflammation. So acute versus chronic is a classification of time. If you're suffering from the disease just now, just a little bit of time, that's acute inflammation. If you've been suffering on it for a very long time, now that's definitely chronic. Okay? Okay, you need to know the difference between metastasis and invasion. What's the difference between metastasis and invasion? Invasion and metastasis both have infiltration. So the cancer cell in invasion will infiltrate locally. Cancer in the bone, infiltrate in the bone, stay in the bone. Cancer in the brain, God forbid, infiltrate the brain, stay in the brain. But metastasis is when the cancer now moves from the brain into the bloodstream or the lymph node and travel far away from the brain to the bone, from the bone to the lung, from the lung to the kidney, from the kidney to the liver. Now that is known as metastasis. So invasion is when you stay where you started. And metastasis is when you move all over the body. Which one has a better prognosis, meaning that you have more hope for survival? Is it invasion or metastasis? Invasion. Very good. Excellent. Good job. Okay. So, the tonsils. The tonsils are like a camp where all of the lymphocytes graduate also. But sometimes they get so inflamed, they get all messed up, so they needed to be removed with a tonsillectomy. Anybody had a tonsillectomy? Anybody had a tonsillectomy? Yeah, tonsillectomy is when the lymph nodes become inflamed beyond hope. They become inflamed beyond healing. When they are too damaged now to repair, so we just remove them. Because it's too late now to rescue them. They have been completely obliterated with the infection. The spleen, also known as the graveyard of the spleen, the graveyard of red blood cell. It has fluid-filled spaces known as the spleen has, this is very important. This is very important. This is very important. This is very important. The spleen has fluid-filled spaces. What are they known as? Sinusoids. These are blood-filled spaces known as sinusoids. Now the spleen is going to be testing the durability. The spleen is going to be testing the durability of red blood cells. If the red blood cell is too weak, it doesn't move fast, it's too old, it's gonna get trapped, and then there are macrophages inside the spleen who will destroy them. These are known as histocytes. These are sinus histocytes. What are sinus histocytes? These are macrophages. These are spleen macrophages. These are spleen macrophages that destroy red blood cells. Who are damaged. Are we clear? So the spleen has a reddish pulp and a white pulp. Now, when we look at the innate immunity, okay, so we finished the lymphatic system. We're about to enter the immune system. So let's stop the lecture here and let's do lab. Everybody take a 10-minute break and come back. We will do lab.